We're going to talk about grad schools today. David Whippy's with us as someone who is enmeshed and finishing up his PhD program right now. I'm sure he can help us out along the way. And also check out that David Whippy is coming to us from our old classroom virtually. I love that. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today are a number of different programs that are available post your undergraduate degree in conflict-related fields. That's going to be the first half of the forum, and then the second half of the forum, I'm going to talk about what makes a great graduate school application for those of you that are thinking about applying for grad school. I just want to start with saying a couple of things. I think grad school has become increasingly really important in almost every area of the world. It's especially true in the United States and Europe and throughout much of Asia, that everyone's getting a bachelor's degree now, and that getting a master's degree is what really sets you apart. And if you want to work in education, especially higher education at a university level, then going even beyond that and getting a PhD also is important. But I would say for almost all of my students, including my own children, I've really counseled them, get your master's degree. And one of the challenging things about doing a master's degree is it's going to start to get more specific, where you're taking, you're studying a subject at a fairly general level here at the university, especially if you're studying peacebuilding. It's going to start to get more specific, and you're going to find a lot of these programs get highly specific in the areas of peacebuilding that they want to do. And so I want to give an introduction to the types of programs that are out there. And these are programs as well that our students, our alumni, have gone into. In fact, anytime you see a program with a star next to it, it means that we either currently or in the past have had an alumni in that program. And again, this is meant as an introduction to some of the key programs that are out there. And there's going to be more follow-up that you can do. I'm going to show you a couple links to the website. I'll also put those in our YouTube video and on our Canvas and on Facebook as well. I'm at the end where you can go to the McKay Center website and the websites to do more information going forward. So I want to start with the programs that are the most like ours. They're conflict analysis and resolution programs. They're interdisciplinary. They cover conflict at all sorts of levels: interpersonal, group, organizational, international. They draw on traditions including psychology, economics, political science, sociology, anthropology, cultural studies, religious studies, history. You're going to get a lot. Almost every professor in your program might have a PhD in a different type of discipline. And typically these degrees are meant to think more about conflict moving to some sustainable transformation and resolution, as opposed to just conflict management. And a lot of times these programs now have various names. You'll see conflict analysis, conflict resolution, peace building. There's a number of different names that you'll see. There's no standard name for the program, which you'll see in a second. Here are some of the key programs. So when I say key programs, these programs are highly regarded. I'm going to start with programs in the United States. I will talk about international programs in a few minutes as well. And so if you're thinking about studying internationally, we've got you covered as well. Of course, at the top is George Mason. It's in part because that's my alumni. That's where I went and got my master's program. You got to be loyal to your program. They also just run an incredible program out of Fairfax, Virginia, which is right outside Washington, D.C. They have master's programs. They have PhD programs. It just was recently renamed the Carter School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. And they're starting to offer multiple different master's programs, including an online program as well. Notre Dame University, another gold standard, the Joan Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, Conflict Resolution and International Peace Studies programs, also master's and PhD programs there. I will say this is an especially challenging school to get into because they typically want 3 to 5 years of field experience before you apply for the master's program. So if that's something that you're interested in, it might be taking that break for a few years, getting some relevant work experience before going back and doing a master's program. Georgetown University's Master's in Conflict Resolution. University of San Diego has another Kroc Institute. It's connected to Notre Dame in Peace and Justice Studies. University of Oregon's program is great in conflict resolution. Eastern Mennonite University, we have multiple students there right now working in conflict transformation. Brandeis University has a great program in coexistence and conflict. 2 of our alumni have graduated from that program. University of Denver's MA in conflict resolution has a special emphasis in mediation, which is interesting for a lot of our students. Creighton University also has a really cool one in negotiation and dispute resolution. These are all either masters, and some of them go up to PhD. For almost all of you coming out of an undergraduate, you would be going to your master's program next. And if any of these programs interest you, I encourage you to go online, take a look at the program, see what professors are doing. You can usually look at course lists, you can look at syllabi, you can look at the projects that professors are working on and get a lot more feel for these programs. A lot of them will have strengths in particular areas. It could be in environmental research or gender studies or international conflict or interpersonal conflict. Some of them will have specialties within their program that might interest you as well. One of the great things about these programs for students that want to be practitioners and work in the field on the ground is that they'll at least have a portion of their program dedicated for people that want to do on the ground sort of work. That's not going to be true with some of the other programs that we're going to talk about, which are heavily research oriented. And so if you're thinking, I want to be a practitioner as a mediator, a conflict facilitator, running my own NGO, what have you, these types of programs are the types of programs that I think that you'll want to primarily be focused on and working in. Okay, any questions about these sorts of programs before we move on?
Do they have scholarship?
I will talk about scholarships in a minute. The answer is yes. Almost all programs have their own scholarships, as well as we'll talk about some scholarships, some general scholarships that are available to peacebuilding students as well. That's a great question. How am I going to pay for this? I'll talk about that in a minute. There's another whole group of programs that are called peace studies programs. You'll see peace and conflict studies, sometimes peace and justice studies. Sometimes this is framed. And this is an academic field which looks at typically large-scale conflict between countries or nations. It typically comes out of political science and is a subfield within international relations around how to stop violent conflict or manage violent conflict. And usually, again, it's interdisciplinary, but leans heavily towards political science. And it's heavily research-based. And so most of these programs are going to take you and really have you delve into quantitative and qualitative research. And you're gonna probably be doing some math, just to be honest. There's gonna be some statistics involved. You're gonna be crunching some numbers. Your Excel is gonna be one of your friends going forward. And for any of our students who have taken a Rand Blind's class on the political science department and have taken any of his classes, Rand is from that tradition of peace and conflict studies. And you probably would have a good taste taking a class from him of what you would be getting yourself into in these sorts of programs. There's some great programs out there: Stanford, Georgetown again, Berkeley, UC San Diego, Cornell University, Columbia University, Duke University. All of these are major schools. They all have really robust programs right now. And if you are really into research, if you are really into numbers, if you're really thinking about, for example, one thing peace studies does is try to predict when a country might fall into civil war, what are the sort of economic and social sort of indicators that might talk about that. What are ways that we can do to prevent conflict? How do we handle economic and international humanitarian aid or what have you from a policy perspective? these could be some really cool programs for you. But I want to differentiate them from those other conflict analysis and resolution programs because the content of the classes that you're taking, what you'll be doing in the classes, they're quite different. And while conflict analysis and resolution does have research components, and they do have the quantitative and qualitative research methods as part of their research, they are more hands-on, and many of the classes will be more oriented to working in the field than peace studies. You can be an expert in peace studies in a particular area of the world and never visited that area of the world before. I've run it across these people, all the time because they're really indicate, they're doing a lot of research, and that's how they become an expert in the field. Some of our students are really interested in going to law school and thinking about law school as a way of looking at conflict. And there's a term in law school that's constantly used called ADR, or alternative dispute resolution. And it means alternatives to adjudication. So alternatives to having a jury or a judge decide the resolution of the dispute. Many court systems throughout the world are now using arbitration and mediation as a way to resolve disputes. Some judges will actually demand it, and demand that individuals go into mediation before they actually get a resolution in court. And so those alternative dispute resolution programs will teach you arbitration, mediation, negotiation in disputes. And for many people, they find that this is a more humane version of the US legal system. And so Harvard has a great program, Tufts Fletcher School of Diplomacy and Law and Diplomacy, Pepperdine. I just did a talk at Pepperdine University just a couple of days ago. They have a really great program in dispute resolution and public policy. We have one of our alumni there right now. Marquette University, the University of Missouri, Ohio State University. All of these have programs that are situated out of their law schools, but focus on alternatives to litigating disputes. There are many others. These are just a sampling of the programs that are available to people right now. There are many others, and in fact, they have a master's, so you can get your Juris Doctorate, which is actually a doctorate degree, which takes 3 years at a university. And many of them have joint LLM programs, which is a Master of Law, and many of those are in dispute resolution. And some have joint masters as well. So it takes you 4 years, but you get your doctorate and your master's. One word of caution for my international students. The US legal system is weird. It's unlike any other legal system in the world. And getting a legal degree from the United States, while it may certainly qualify you to practice law in the United States, it doesn't qualify you to practice law back home. And so many systems in the Pacific are based off of a British system. The US was also originally based off a British system, but took a lot of major detours along the way, and just doesn't look like the legal systems that are found throughout the world. And so if you want to practice law, and you want to practice it outside of the United States, going to a US law school, I don't think is a great advice for you. The only advice that I would say is if you want to practice international business law, for example, or international human rights law, those would connect, right? And you'll see that there's connections to the US legal system because of the role that the United States plays in both of those systems, that you could get away with it there. But if you want to end up being a divorce attorney or a contracts attorney or property attorney or something else, and you want to do that in Samoa, or you want to do that back in Taiwan or in Japan or wherever, going to a US law school is probably going to be a waste of your time. You're going to have to redo it, the whole thing over again when you go back. There are also some really cool international peace building programs. Maybe our closest connection and tie is to the University of Otago in New Zealand, with their Masters in Peace and Conflict Studies. We have had a number of our alumni. I'm thinking now probably something like 8, 9 of our alumni there. One of them is David Whippy, and he is here to give a shout out. Anything you want to say, David, about Otago University as someone who's in their PhD program right now?
Yeah, they've got a good, thanks for that, Chad. They've got a good mix of students from different, diverse, different cultures from around the world. It's a smaller program, so it's similar to the Peacebuilding program here at BYU Hawaii. Um, you can really, for the master's course, you really can, you know, and maybe I'm saying this not in the right sense, but you could really put together the classes and focus on a particular area. So in a sense, while there's most of the masters come out of the Masters of Arts, you really can pick the classes that you want to focus on, and that you can take that focus starting from the masters going into your PhD if that's the path that you want to take. There's partial scholarships always available. There's scholarships available, full scholarships. Those I think some of them are already posted on our Facebook page. And so, you know, this is a really good international school. If you're thinking of working anywhere in the Pacific, sometimes also in a little bit of Asia that's sitting on the Pacific Rim, this school also builds up the connections and networks with academics and practitioners in the field. It's the school that you work out of, much like the David O. McKay Center for Intercultural Understanding. It's called the National Center for Peace and Conflict Studies. And so a lot of the peace programs within New Zealand and within that the government works with, Australia and the greater Pacific, comes through that network, the National Peace and Conflict Center at University of Otago. Smaller faculty, seems similar to our IPB faculty here, but a number of awesome students and awesome programs there.
And one cool connection for me is that the founder of the program was the dean of my graduate school at George Mason before. And so there's a lot of just connection. Our students have been really happy that have gone there. And there's special scholarships for Pacific Islanders as well. Is that right, David, for the school as well? Your Pacific Islanders?
Yeah, there are scholarships, yeah, for Pacific Islanders and for minorities and for people from, you know, obviously marginalized backgrounds. And I made sure to use that connection in my application. I made sure to use Chad Ford's name and Kevin Clement's name, so that got me in the door.
And one of our alumni is now a professor there, Michael Lingalinga from Samoa, who went and got his master's and his PhD from Otago and is now a professor there as well. Michael is a great friend of our program. And, so there'll be BYU alumni there. And they're running an online program that we've advertised in our Facebook, the Case Center Peacebuilders Facebook page as well. During COVID right now, we can get it in 18 months, and it's really cool. University of Queensland, also an excellent program in the Pacific. A number of our students have gone to the University of Peace in Costa Rica. That university is actually hosted by the United Nations, and it's a very unique program. It's in English, though it is in Costa Rica. It is in English. And if you don't speak Spanish, that's okay. I've actually been down and visited. You can get by with English there, but they have peace education, peace and media and conflict, gender and peace building, international peace studies, masters in national resources and peace, lots of different cool programs out of University for Peace in Costa Rica. Tel Aviv University in Israel, great program. London School of Economics in England, awesome. Trinity College in Ireland. University of Bradford, we have one of our students who's finishing up their PhD right now with their master's at University of Bradford in England. Mindanao State University in the Philippines, and some cool scholarships that are there. And for our Asian students that are interested in studying peace building. Uppsala University in Sweden. There's many more. I'm going to point you to where you can find out about more of these programs. One thing I'll say about international programs for my American students is that typically these programs in the United States don't carry as much weight for American students back in America as an American graduate school program does. It's different if you're an international student, but if you're an American student, it's not quite seen the exact same way. That's fine. If you're going to practice internationally, if you know that you want to work in the Pacific, or you know that you want to work in Israel, or you know that you want to work in Europe or the Philippines or South Africa or Sweden, and you know that's where you want to be, great to take a program there, make lots of connections, get to start working on the ground, great. But if you think, hey, I just want to go and it's sort of a vacation for me for a couple of years, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to work in Utah, I actually think that you might be better suited to take an American graduate school program and just the doors that it opens up for you. I'm not speaking to our international students there. It's seen very differently for our international students. But I do think that one thing that you want to think about is the area of the world that you want to work in, and trying to take a program in that area because of the connections that you make in grad school programs, I think are really important. Okay. There's some great online programs. These are online only programs, so you can take them from anywhere in the world. George Mason, University of Peace in Costa Rica has one, North Carolina, Greensboro, Cal State, Creighton, University of Denver. I should add University of Otago to the list. They just started an online master's program there as well. So if you don't have the ability to travel to where one of these programs are, and unfortunately they're not in every state. A lot of people ask me about Utah. Is there one in Utah? No, there isn't one in Utah. This is an option for you. With COVID, who knows? Maybe all of our programs are going to be online, going forward in the future for who knows. But I will say, if you have the opportunity and it works in your life schedule to actually attend in person, one of the great things about master's programs is your cohorts are small, your incoming class is small, you get to work intimately with professors, you make these deep connections, and often those connections lead to your first job, and it's harder to make those online than it is in person. And so if you can afford to do it, if you have the flexibility to travel and live somewhere for 18 months to 2 years to do it, I highly encourage you to take the in-person programs. I know that's just not the case for some of us, and whether for work reasons or because I have a family or I have a full-time job and I can't make that work, online programs are an option and a growing option in a number of other programs. And by now you will at least know how much you do or don't like online learning, and that will reflect, reflect into your decision. Finally, I just want to give a brief mention to other conflict-related degrees. These are other graduate degrees that our IPB students have pursued in the past: marriage and family therapy, public administration, counseling, clinical psychology, diplomacy, international relations, anthropology, organizational behavior, human rights, genocide prevention, and measurement and evaluation, which is measuring the effectiveness of peace-building programs using data to try to assess how effective they are. This is actually a really hot degree right now, in part because you can make great money working out of nonprofits with this sort of degree, because it's the way that they're able to get grant money, by showing the effectiveness of programs. And so if you're a nerd, and you like numbers and data and statistics, and this could be a really lucrative career. And so I don't have time today to go into all the major programs in each of these areas. However, I can tell you that if you're interested in marriage and family therapy, counseling, and clinical psychology, you could talk to Amanda Ford. She's one of our faculty members, and she works primarily in this area. I should have put on their social work as well. Social work is another one that a lot of our students go into. If you're interested in international relations, David Whitby actually did his program essentially in international relations as well, and so he can talk to you a little bit about that. If you're interested in organizational behavior, Seamus Fitzgerald, one of our adjunct professors, has done work in organizational behavior and can talk to you more about that. And if you're interested in one of these other fields, public administration or what have you, and you want to say, hey, Professor Ford, can you give me information of that? We have alumni who have done this work. I can hook you up with those alumni, and they can walk you through the process as well. So if any of those are fields that you're really interested in, we placed, I think, 3 students last semester in marriage and family therapy programs, for example, out of Peacebuilding. So yeah, lots of stuff that you can do in those areas. Okay. And there are some online resources. I will post these links both on Canvas. Our TAs do it on Canvas, as well as on the Facebook page. So if you want to do more research, you can go to either of these. Our McKay Center web page has a lot more programs that are listed here, including the ones that we've talked about, as well as those descriptions. And the Peace and Justice Studies Guide to Academic Programs is a pretty exhaustive list of programs that exist throughout the world. You can do searches, you can look at specifics, and it can take you through lots of those as well. So you can either take a picture and screenshot that or look for those links that come later. Scholarships. In addition to the scholarships that each program will have based off of financial needs, sometimes to recruit certain people of different populations, like we're recruiting Pacific Islanders, we're recruiting women, people of certain socioeconomic status or whatever. There are two big scholarships that our students have had success getting in the past that are general scholarships, and they're really cool. One is the Rotary Peace Fellowship. This is awesome. Every year there's 50 awarded. They are to specific programs, so you'll want to go and look at these and take a look at what the programs are, but they're programs around the world. And you have to get into the program, but if you get into the program, the Rotary Peace Fellowship is a full ride scholarship. It pays for not only your tuition, but your books and your room and board, which is a pretty awesome, awesome thing to be able to get. And we've now, I think, had 3 or 4 of our students win these scholarships. And so they're really worth going and taking a look at. The Asian Peacebuilding Scholarship is for Asian students as well. And it's a really cool program that's based, again, out of the Philippines and part of University for Peace. And there's some really great scholarships there. And one of the things interesting, I've been working with the Laureate Sport for Good Foundation. David reminded me we have to have a talk later about this, is that they're getting ready to make a major investment into the Pacific around peace education. And as part of that work, they're going to be offering some really cool scholarships. They're not quite ready yet, but within the next 6 months to a year, I think there's going to be some really cool opportunities for our students that are from the Pacific Islands and Micronesia to have some access to some general scholarships as well. We'll talk more about that, David. Remind me. This is just something like literally on my radar screen in the last couple of days. So they're reaching out to me, and somebody even knows David Whitby. Apparently the Whitbys are very famous in the Pacific, because every time somebody says they're from the Pacific, I'm like, do you know David Whitby? And it's amazing how often, if they don't know David, they know the Whitbys. So really cool. All right, so that's going to be something really exciting going forward. All right, I'm going to pause there for a minute and just open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions before we go into what makes a great grad school application, any questions that anybody has about grad schools, what's out there, what's available, questions that you might have. Okay, I don't hear any. Let me just check our Facebook, make sure that there's no questions there. Feel free, if you are on our Facebook page right now, to go ahead and post any comments that you might have. Okay. Don't see any right now. Everybody sure? Okay. Let's keep moving. Okay, what's a great grad school application? I'm going to talk about several principles here. The first is that for many grad schools, there is essentially an entrance exam. The GRE, for many, if you're going to law school, LSAT, sometimes it's the GMAT as well. If your school requires it, not all schools do. Most schools in the US do, though this might be a great time to apply because of COVID, many schools have waived it this year. and are not requiring it this year because of the difficulty of getting into a testing center because of COVID. So this might be your one lucky year to not do it. It's a big deal. You should study for it. If you're taking an international school, none of them require it. I don't think there's any international schools that require an entrance exam like this. And so that is sometimes a perk for going to an international school. But if you're taking a school in the United States, your GRE and LSAT is going to be your number one factor in getting into this program. And you can study for it. It's not just measuring raw intelligence. Each of these programs are things that you can practice on. The library has study guides. There are online programs that you can use to help you study and pay for. There's books that you can get at Amazon, all up to online classes that can be quite expensive, where you can even get private tutoring for these things. While I don't recommend the huge financial output, I think that there's ways to study this and do this themselves or more affordable online things. I mean, if you have the money to burn, go for it. But I think for most people, don't get into debt over this. But you should be spending a significant period of time preparing for this. I typically say 3 to 4 months, at least an hour a day, and then a full 4 hours on the weekend of taking the test. So usually these tests are broken into sections. I would spend 1 hour each day taking a section, then looking at what I missed and trying to understand why I missed it. Then I'd move on to the next section the next day. And then there's 4 to 5 sections. And then on a Saturday, I would take it all together. These are time tests. Take them time. Don't practice taking the test and taking your time taking the test, because that's not going to help you in a time test. So some of this is pacing yourself and knowing not just how to move through the test, but move to the test in the time that's allotted to take the test. Again, you can go on Amazon and look up tons of books around this. They'll have practice tests available in those books. There's online resources. Our library at BYU Hawaii has resources available as well. But it's really about discipline. I took the LSAT and the GRE, and I studied my butt off for them. And it meant the difference dramatically in the schools that I got into, but also the scholarships that were awarded to me because schools wanted me because their rankings on US News and World Report or what have you, the Princeton Review, are often reflected in the average GRE or LSAT scores of their students that come in. So it's a big deal for them. Number 2 is your GPA. It's a big deal, but not as big a deal as you think. I have students that come into my office crying and say, I have a 3.5 GPA. I will never get into grad school. And I laugh. That's not true. There's grade inflation. Many people think that if I don't have a 4.0, I am a not smart student or that I failed in some fundamental way. Grad schools don't see it that way. A 3.5 GPA is a really good GPA. It's not going to be that different than your 4.0 GPA. Getting into that. And so don't worry about that. Not all schools are just giving away 4.0s to everybody who takes classes there. In fact, if you have a 3.0 or higher GPA, I think you are a competitive graduate school applicant. A 3.0 or higher on your cumulative score. If it's a little bit lower than that, and you can show that my major GPA is higher, that maybe I struggled a little bit in GE classes or things like that, that can also be used to your advantage and say, okay, my GE class grades weren't great, but look at what I did in my major classes, right? That can be another way. If you have a 2.5 or higher, you still could possibly get into grad school, but what you're gonna want at that point is to ask the professors that are writing letters of recommendation to explain why your GPA is lower. Maybe there were some life experiences that were going on, some hardships that you had happening in your life. Maybe it took you a year or two to get serious about school and you can show a positive trend in your GPA going up. I mean, there's a number of ways to write letters and to explain the situation in a way that can still be helpful to you. So don't give up. If you're below a 2.0, I'm not sure that you probably even like school at that point. And so maybe grad school is not the thing for you. But I so often hear people that are so worried that I have a 3.4 GPA, I'm never going to get in. Yes, you can. We've had students get into great programs with those GPAs. You're going to have to do well on your GRE or LSAT, but it's going to help. Your personal essay, it seems like it's busy work, but it's a big deal. this is the way you go from being think about this. If you're in any of our peace building classes, you move from being an object to being a person, right? You're a piece of paper. You're a bunch of numbers, you're a GPA, you're an LSAT score, whatever, but they're human beings on this committee. This is your ability to tell your story and help them see you as a person, help them see why you're coming here, what this program would mean to you, what you want to do with that, what your aspirations are going forward. And so I always say 3 big things on your personal essays. The big picture, why are you here? Where did you come from and why are you here, right? You want to tell your journey, your story. 2 is the specificity. I want to talk about why in particular I am picking your program. Don't just write a generic letter that says, I want to do peace building or I want to do social work. Tell them why you picked that particular program. Be specific. There's a specific class that I'm really interested in. There's a professor that teaches there, because I'll tell you, the professors sit on these graduate school admission committees and we all have egos and we all love to hear our names, right? Oh, I saw Professor Ford is doing this sort of research. I really would love to do research with Professor Ford and take that class. We're going to be like, oh, really? Okay, I really like that student. That student sounds really smart. I think I'd like to study with that student, right? Okay. And then creativity. If you can tell it in a way that's interesting or entertaining or tells a story, by all means do it, right? They're reading through lots of these every day. If you can captivate them by telling them a story, great. Let me tell you what I see a lot of people do, which I don't think is great. Let me tell you about the hardest thing that ever happened to me in my life and why you should let me in because of it. No. If it's connected to why you chose peace building, awesome. But if it's just I'm going to try to bring you to tears by telling you how hard my life has been, that's not what they're looking for. I think a lot of people think that's what they want. It's not what they want. Now, if that's connected, again, the reason you're studying peace building, great. If you're studying internationally and you want to write a thing that said, my parents took me on a vacation to France. And while I was at France, I fell in love with France. And that's the reason I'm coming to school, because I really love traveling internationally and I want to come to France. You are going to get in the rejection pile so quickly. The last thing they want is a tourist, right? If you visited that country for a week or 2 with your family and you were staying in a hotel, you do not understand that culture. You are not a local now, right? You were a tourist while you were there. And I see a lot of times people trying to turn that into that. Or I went on a 2 or 3 week humanitarian aid trip. And therefore, I fell in love with the people and this is the culture for me. I don't actually think that's helpful, right? Now, if you have a specific connection to a place that you're studying, my parents are from there. I have relatives there. I've spent significant time there. I speak the language. I served a mission there. A number of things like that, that's different. That can give you a great connection in. But don't take a 1, 2, or 3 week sort of jaunt over there and turn that into your essay. This is the other one that I want to scare people away from. Anything you want to add to that, David Whitby? About what makes a great essay or?
Yeah, I agree with you when you were talking about mentioning professors' names, because that's what I did for mine. I especially talked about specific professors, and I wasn't accepted on the first try. They had to go through a committee to accept me in the program, and these professors became my advocates, and later on, obviously, became my supervisors. I did research on what work they did. I mentioned their work, their research in my letter, just so that I could, make an impression on them and show that I'd done my part in this letter.
Because these are small programs, they're really interested in getting people that they like in the programs, because we're going to be working intensely for the next few years. The programs are small. You'll get to work much closer with your professors, even that you did at BYU Hawaii in the process. And they're thinking about, who am I going to work with for the next couple of years? If you have diverse experiences, whether that's ethnicity, life experiences, things like that, I think it's important to mention them. All of these programs are looking for diversity. They're looking for a number of students that reflect a broad range of opinions, backgrounds, and if you bring one of those to the table, let people know about it. Okay, letters of recommendation. These are really important. These are professors talking to professors, essentially, right? And what they're asking is, hey, Chad, or hey, David, you've been through grad school. You know this student. Do you think this student would be a good fit in a grad school program? And we're going to say, based off of our experience working with you, yes, they would be, right? And that sort of communication really matters, right? Because we've been through that system. So a couple of things. Don't ask a famous relative to write a letter of recommendation for you. Don't ask the president of the university or your mission president or a family friend to write a letter. Ask your professors that have seen you in the classroom to write these letters. We're the ones who've seen your work. If you feel like I don't have a relationship with a professor and I don't feel like anybody could write me a good letter, start building one. Say, hey, Professor Whippy, can we have a meeting? I want to talk about grad school. I want to talk about things. I want to talk about some classes going forward. Sometimes there's opportunities to do research or to volunteer in the Case Center projects or other things where we can get to know our students a little bit better. You can build a relationship with your professors, especially here at BYU Hawaii. Typically, they'll ask for 2 to 3 letters, right? And so you want to have 2 or 3 professors that you can go to for that. You have every right when you ask for that letter to ask them, can you give me a great letter of recommendation? Can you give me a stellar letter of recommendation? And every professor should be honest with you about their answer to that. And I will tell you, yes, I can. Please put me down. Or no, I can't. If I say, no, I can't, you can ask, are there things that I could do to get that? And I would tell you, yes, I want to see you do this, this, or this to improve your performance. And then I can write the letter. Or sometimes it's too late. You're already graduating. It's too late. And the answer is going to be, I think you should find someone else to write you the letter. They're doing you a favor because the last thing you want is a bad letter of recommendation coming in. It will torpedo your grad school things. So you have every right to ask. I know some people may think it's rude. It's not rude to ask. Give recommenders plenty of time. You want a good letter of recommendation? Don't come to me on a Friday afternoon and say, hey, Professor Ford, I need this by Saturday morning. I'm probably going to get in the box with you when you do that, right? Because I know you would have had more time to ask than that. The general rule of thumb is give us a month to write these letters. And when you do prepare a packet of information, digitally is fine. It doesn't have to be in person. These are the schools that I'm applying to. Here's a paper that I wrote in your class. Here's the classes that I took and the grades that I worked on. Here's a project that I worked on or some extracurricular activity. Put all of that right in front of us. Some of you we know really well. Some of you we know less. It just helps bring that all to help us write that letter for us. Because one of the things we're going to talk about is your writing. And we're going to talk about the classes that you took for us and your participation in those classes. We're going to talk about any projects that you might have been working on. Just send that all to us. That's just in an email, right? Thank you so much for agreeing to write a letter of recommendation for me. For your information, here's the schools that I'm applying to. Here's the classes that I took. Here was the grades that I got in those classes. Here's a writing sample, and here's the projects. Love you so much when you do that. Saves us a ton of time to go have to research and pick all that out from you. And then the other thing I will say, I don't want to speak for everybody. Most of us like writing letters of recommendation. This is a cool opportunity for our students. It helps us feel good when you want to go for that. So don't be shy about asking us. You're not pulling teeth. This is something that we like to do and want to do. And if you ask and it's a week before the deadline and you haven't seen that letter come in, you have every right to send another follow-up email and say, hey, Professor Ford, just checking in. Just want to remind you the deadline is in a week or whatever. You're not pestering us. We have a lot on our plate. Sometimes things fall through the cracks. Don't take it personally. Just remind us and we'll get there. The last thing is that you'll see in many of these letters, the grad school will give you 2 options. One is that I will not see my letters. And one is that I have the right to see my letters. And they're asking you to check one of those 2 boxes. I strongly recommend that you check the box that says, I waive my right to see the letters. I do not need to see my letters. The reason that I suggest this is that Grad schools tend to think that if the professor can write it without you seeing it, that it will be a more honest letter. But if that you're seeing it, that sometimes professors will pull punches or soften the letter or whatever because they know that you're reading it and they don't want you to be upset with them. And then it depends on the professor. I always give a copy of the letter. If I agree to write a letter, I think you have the right to see it. Check the box that says I don't have the right. When I upload your letter, I send you a PDF copy of your letter so you can see exactly what I say for you. Some professors don't want to do that and don't be angry with them or assume that it's a bad letter because of it. That's just their policy. But you can ask them what they're thinking of is. From me, you'll get the letter. Extracurricular activities, pick ones that are relevant to your field of study. If they're not, don't do it. Work experience, again, work experience that's relevant to your field of study, talking about that, really important. If it's not, you can mention it that I worked when I was in school, right? But you know, if you're working at McDonald's and you're trying to go into counseling, don't try to make the connection, right? It's not relevant work experience. People ask about missions. I think missions are relevant. I typically put it down as service, right? And I spent 2 years of giving service to these people. Here's the things that I did when I was on my mission. That's impressive that you spent 2 years of your life or 18 months of your life doing something. And I think that you can mention it. Some schools get a little bit about the proselyting part. And, you know, sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. And so, you know, it's up to you how you frame your mission. But I certainly think there's ways to think about the service that you're giving and all the other things that you're doing on your mission as being highly relevant. Publications are huge. If you present a paper or publish it at a student conference, that's a lot of what you're doing in grad school. And so professors are really interested in that and it looks well on your resume. And so if you have the opportunity to take a paper that you wrote in class and turn it into a research presentation or look at a student research conferences and I'm going to go present that paper, it's something really nice to have on your resume. I should also just say on resumes, it's fine to include a resume. Don't let your personal essay be your resume. Let your resume be your resume and let your personal essay tell a story about who you are. Okay, finally, what's the right school for me? Costs, right? Can I afford this school? I think it's okay at times to take out a loan for your education. There can be lots of positive things that come from that education, but be careful. Don't get so in debt that the type of work that you want to do, you can't afford to do anymore. I've had so many friends who racked up so much debt that they wanted to go into humanitarian aid or they wanted to work in domestic abuse shelters or whatever, but the only thing they could do is take a corporate job because they're so far in debt. That's the only salary that can pay for that. You do have to pay these loans back. They can be worth your while. Master's degree can dramatically increase your earning power and your starting salary. And so it can pay back pretty quickly, but don't go overboard. I've had too many students that have just gone overboard and they spent too much money. And that is really, really, really sad. And I think that you don't want to do that. Location. Don't pick a school just because it's near the beach or just because it's close to home or because you don't like cold weather or that you don't like hot weather or because it's a country that you've always wanted to travel to. I always tell people those are not good reasons to pick a school. Pick a school because it's the right program for you, because it has the right courses, because you're going to be mentored by the right people. You're only there for 18 months to 2 years. If you don't like the snow, but it's the right program for you, go to the place with the snow. No one hates snow more than me. But you go there sometimes because it's the right experience. It's not a great decision to just make this based off of, I want to be by the beach. Specialization. A lot of these schools will have very specific things: gender and peace building, environment and peace building, restorative justice, reconciliation processes, whatever. If one of those really excites you, that should be a factor for you. I don't care how the school is ranked. If they have a specialty that's right in line with what you want to do, that's a really great reason um, to pick that school. And think about what I want to be doing in 5 to 10 years, and will this school help me get on that journey? And again, it takes a lot of research, and I think that really a lot of this is the work that you're going to put in researching this, just like you would research a marriage partner. This isn't Tinder where you just swipe, what is it, right or left? I don't know. Right? Like, do your research, and then come to Brother Whippy and I, Brother Lingalinga or Amanda, and say, hey, I've been thinking about these 3 or 4 schools. Can you tell me more about them? If we can, we will. We could also connect you to an alumni who's been through the program. They'll be the great source of information. I can give you an email of a student and say, hey, here's several students who went to this program. I'm going to connect you two together, and you can ask them everything about how hard is it to find an apartment there? What's the cost of living like? What was the workload like in the classes, right? Like, what was the physical environment? You can ask all of those questions and get get to know them. And so those are all things that I think that you need to take into consideration when you're picking the right school for you. And just this is a very serious decision that you're going to make. It's going to impact the rest of your life. Put a lot of thought and time and prayer into it, and don't be fooled by, I just love the beach. It's not going to work out for you that way. All right, let's open it up to any questions, or David, if you have anything else to add about that.
No, I don't have it. I think you covered it well. I saw Michael on the call, if it's okay to ask him if he has anything to add also.
Mike, anything you'd like to add? Great to see you.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
I came in when Chad was talking about drafting, about grades, and I fell into that because I left BYU in '96 with a 1.7 GPA. So because I was more at the beach and not in the classroom. But when I came back the second round, a lot of those grades pulled my overall GPA down. So even though I was killing it in a lot of the IPB classes, my overall GPA was quite low. And one of the things that I did was, when I wrote my letter towards grad school, I didn't talk about my Book of Mormon class or the basketball class that I took, or those other classes that pulled my grades down. But I actually calculated all of my Peacebuilding classes, which came up to basically a 4.0. And that's how I kind of advertised myself towards, the program. It's just, because you're going into a very specific program, I didn't talk about, introduction to math or algebra, or, those other sort of, English 101 and those sort of classes. The other thing that I really strongly, what I did in my last 6 to 8 months, every night I dedicated about 2 hours and just looked at scholarships and anything that I could apply for. And I know a lot of you guys look at the big money, but I actually applied for anything, whether it was $100, $150, $200, $500, any amount of money helps you breathe a little bit better when you're at grad school. So you got to remember all those big scholarships that, there's going to be thousands of kids applying for it, but, they tend to neglect those little ones. So I was actually very fortunate that I got blessed to have quite a few of those little 200, 250, 300 scholarships, and all of them add up to, a decent amount of money. So, but if you're really keen and interested in coming sort of to the deep south, especially the New Zealand, Australian programs in the Pacific, then I'm here as a resource. Obviously David's going through the process as well. Just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help out.
This is also a great time to say that amazing man right there that's talking, Michael Lingalinga, is going to be our forum speaker next week. And David's going to talk about peace building in the Pacific and the opportunities that are there. And he's going to have a whole hour with us next week as well. And so we're really excited to have Mike. Mike was our first graduate from the Peacebuilding program to earn a doctorate degree. And now is a professor and came back and taught with us for many years, and even took over as director of the McKay Center when I went on sabbatical for a while. And so he knows our program well. He loves our program. He's doing really cool things right now in Otago as well. And so a great mentor to anybody who wants to navigate that process. And I think Mike will be the first to tell you that a lot of sacrifice that went into that, both in the work and the amount of workload, financial sacrifice, how hard it is to do this. But I hope you tell me, was it worth it?
Most definitely. I think I have no regrets going through it. Going through this, always, if you come in thinking that grad school is just going to be, you're just going to ride a wave, then I don't think that you're setting yourself up for something completely different. What I can promise you is that I found grad school quite, for the lack of words, quite easy, because you don't have to worry about a calculus or stats paper. You don't have to worry about, all these other English papers or religion paper to focus on. You actually studying on something that you really enjoy. So now you're refining it to something that is specific to your interest, and that's what I mean by grad school being easy, because now they force you to think critically about an issue that you're very passionate about. So from that perspective, grad school was very gratifying for me.
Wow, Mike, I thought you were going to say because you were so well prepared at BYU Hawaii that you just skated through all your classes because of how well you were prepared. That's what I thought.
Well, let me say this. The first thing I did on my second week of class at Otago is I repented and I sent an email to Chad, because I didn't think the IBP program actually set me up well theoretically and the content and those sort of things for grad school. But ironically, the first 3 or 4 books that we had to read, we already covered it in Chad's class. So yes, I did repent. Peacebuilding, the IPB program, it sets you up well in advance in terms of sort of from a theoretical perspective. So yeah, awesome program. You'll do fine.
One of the reasons,
I agree with that.
One of the reasons that is, and our students have that common thing, is that I based it off my grad school program. There weren't a lot of undergraduate programs at the time. And so when we were creating the Peacebuilding program, we based it off of a grad school program and then lowered the workload. One thing I think Mike and David will tell you, that the amount of reading and the amount of writing will be higher than it was in our program. That what you're expected to read on a weekly basis and the length of the papers and the intensity of the research that you have to do, that is significantly higher.
Just a little bit.
One other thing I'm just going to throw out there is if you haven't taken a statistics class, you're probably going to run into quantitative research classes in almost every graduate school program that's there. And at least taking a basic statistics class would be a huge help to you, as well as both our political science program and our psychology program run quantitative research classes as well that can give you more in-depth there. And you have extra classes that you can sign up for. We don't require those, but they certainly would be helpful to you as you get into the grad school program. Because not all our students are going to grad school, we don't require it here, but it's definitely something. If I've heard a complaint from our alumni going to grad school, is like, you didn't prepare me for the stats, right? And the answer is we don't really, but there are ways to get that if you want it. Hao, you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question on letters of recommendation. So what would be the ideal number of letters I should send out? Should I send out, a bunch of letters, or should I just be humble and send 1 or 2? So how many letters should I send out for the application?
Will tell you. It'll tell you we need 2 to 3. It's usually 2 to 3 referees. They usually don't even give you a space to send more. They don't want to see more. They don't want to read them all. And so, 2 to 3 people. And let's say that you're applying for a social work program, but you're a peace building major, but you took some social work classes. have one of those professors be a social work professor, right? If you're doing psychology, have one of those professors be psychology. If you're doing peace building, make sure one of your professors is peace building that you're hitting up. If you're doing it, I think you guys get the point, right? Because we're such an interdisciplinary program, if you go into a program that is more specific to a particular disciplinary field, make sure that one of those letters is coming from one of those folks as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hal.
I've got a question.
Yeah, Emma?
So I was wondering if like the resources, or I guess like the notes that you made for the PowerPoint would be available later, because I don't know what kind of graduate school I want to think about. And so I'm like what schools are like offer which ones. And I feel like that's a pretty good pretty good list, at least to start with like researching.
So all of this, I literally cut and pasted all of this from the McKay Center website. This entire presentation exists on the website. So I'm going to have our TAs put this in all the announcements for all of our classes with links to the McKay Center, the specific link, as well as to that other link that I showed you, as well as the links to those scholarships. And it'll show up on Canvas. I will also put it in, if you've been following us on Facebook Live, I will put it right in the chat feature as well. And so that you can follow those links there and get all that information. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay. That's been an hour. We'll be back next week with Mike Lingalinga. Dr. Lingalinga is going to talk to us about conflict work in the Pacific. Really excited to have him with us next week. And we'll see you here next week. Aloha, everybody.